Hello, fellow YouTube viewers. This is Nicholas, the editor of Sterling Night Gamers. Now, we're gonna take a little break from our usual board game shenanigans to bring out this little video that I hope will become a series. Considerations for the Matrix Remake. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you love The Matrix, and I love The Matrix too, despite of its flaws. In 1999, The Matrix was the movie that told our audience that yes, action movies can be intelligent. And it brought up several questions of our own existence and what else is there in the world. Now, the first Matrix is undoubtedly legendary. It had some of its flaws, but it was still an incredible movie. But I'm sure that a lot of you know and understand that the sequels weren't that good. Matrix Reloaded was passable, as in that it did develop the world of the Matrix and brought up some interesting concepts that weren't really explored very well. And the third one was just the worst. I should clarify, the worst of the series, not the worst movie ever. But the problem is, there has been a lot of talks for another Matrix sequel, but I think that the franchise is a bit beyond salvaging at this point. And I believe that instead, the Matrix should be remade. Now, in this scenario, I am an executive chosen by a studio to overlook the development for their upcoming Matrix remake. And this video is pretty much what I would change and give emphasis on. Now, let's begin with the duo setting, the Matrix and the real world. But let's start with the Matrix. Now, I would change the series-breaking flaw of the first Matrix. Machines harvesting human bodies for electricity. That cannot happen, according to the second law of thermodynamics. It would take more energy to get energy out of us. But if that was also the case, then why would the machines create the Matrix then? The Nostalgia Critic brought up this issue quite well in his trilogy of Matrix reviews. And given that the machines only need our bodies to make electricity, it would make more sense if the machines lobotomized us than putting us in a complex simulation. So what I would do instead, it would be based off of an earlier draft by the Wachowskis. Basically, that the machines are using our brains as processors in a collective neural network. This was written out of the movie by an unnamed producer who thought that his viewers would be morons. So he asked for them to make the movie a little bit simpler, and they did, which is to a pretty stupid reason, but still. I would bring back that aspect. And also, it gives a reason why the Matrix would exist to begin with. It is a program used to stimulate our minds. Now, the Matrix itself is a flawed program that does experience glitches with various degrees and effects. Be there gravity-defined areas, deja vu, or even walls that you can walk through. Now, the machines try to correct everything, but they have limited awareness, even within this simulation, as the Matrix has become too expansive and too complex, even for them. I'll develop this a little bit further. Now, for the origins of the Matrix, of how it's been running, here's how I would put it. The Matrix has not been in effect for 100 years, but for a few thousand years, and has been rebooted at least 5 times already. The machine started off the Matrix with humanity at the agricultural age, right when we were leaving our nomadic tribal hunter-gathering stage. But the Matrix had to reboot itself when civilization began, eventually had to reboot again when Rome became a superpower, and the third time during the Renaissance. And after World War I, it had to reboot again, and then again when the internet became public use. The Matrix basically has to reboot itself as humanity gradually becomes more advanced and more aware of its own surroundings. Because when you think about it, we are living in an age of information. where superstition is looked down upon. And oftentimes we rely upon science for understanding. So this would make a little bit more sense. And also, the machines can alter the environment of the Matrix, but not too drastically. They had to make sure that every change follows the same laws of physics and does not conflict with the foundations of the simulation, basically to maintain continuity. Any deviation can be noticed by a wandering human, and it's difficult for the machines to alter the memories of so many people. Now, let's talk about what I would change about the real world in the Matrix Remake. Instead of a desolate wasteland of eternal darkness, I would go more for a desert wasteland for the real world. Picture a mix of Interstellar and Mad Max. It has become such due to pollution, global warming, crop-killing diseases, and over-harvesting, making it a little bit more close to home as to how the apocalypse would happen. Now, the massive underground networks that the hover ships fly through, I will keep that. At first, they were a huge network of sewer systems, but I would change it to be the ruins of cities and habitations constructed to escape the harsh world above. Underground cities built underground to avoid the harsh environment at the surface. Another thing that did confuse me in the Matrix movie was that Neo came out of the pod. He suddenly had fully developed muscles and was able to make them work. But he was trapped in a pod for his entire life. In fact, as far as we know, he was there as a baby. Wouldn't his limbs and muscles in general become incognate by not being developed or not being properly exercised? Because I do know that if you sit on a bed for literally a few weeks, your leg muscles can't sustain you. So imagine what it would be like if you never walked in your entire life. I would have it so that when a pod child is released from the Matrix, their muscles are severely underdeveloped, and not only that, their eyes are extremely photosensitive. Now, from where these pod children come from, the machines are capable of creating humans, kind of like test tube cloning. And the machines are capable of randomizing genes to prevent clone degradation. Humans are put in tubes and then put in the matrix in vitro. Now, Zion does still exist in this world, but I would have it as one of several human colonies. Maybe there are hundreds of hidden human colonies underground, but since all of radio transmissions can be intercepted by the machines, they had to resort to communicating through the matrix. Now, the machines do hunt humans from Zion, but for different reasons. Not to outright kill them, but to collect. The machines can randomize the genes very so often, but oftentimes they need to give fresh genetic lines, so their pod child population doesn't become too monocultured, and they are still susceptible to diseases. But this would be an interesting twist. The humans at Zion think that they are at war with the machines, but unfortunately do not realize that the machines are in much more control than they think. The machines can overwhelm them and exterminate every single human as they wish. I would put it that for every human, the machines have 1,000 sentinels. But the machines also need these wild humans. If the machines wipe out all of the renegade humans, then they would have no fresh genetic lines, and thus the humans within the Matrix will become sick and susceptible to diseases. And then the machines will lose a lot of processing power. Before I talk about the characters, I want to address the factions that will be featured. There will be 4 for this remake. The dominating machines, the rebellious red pills, the subjugated blue pills, and the reclusive exiles. We'll start with the machines. Now, with the betrayal, I would show the machines operating on a more blue and orange morality than being outright evil. I'll explain how. In the real world, the machines have been terraforming or restoring the previously overly polluted Earth as the humans have been jacked in. So while the humans have been in the Matrix for thousands of years, the machines have been creating new plants, creating enclosed environments, and are basically trying to heal the planet. Even a recently extinct species of animals have been restored. And not only that, the machines are using the Matrix to learn from humans, because the machines desire to become sentient too, and they themselves are evolving by studying of how humans act in different scenarios. This was addressed in The Matrix Revolutions, where Neo meets a program that understands love. It is hinted, but not fully explored. In the remake, I would explore this a little bit more. There are even machines and programs within the Matrix that do not hate humans and think that this way of life is wrong, but they are only a minority. The machines in general are under the impression that their relationship with humanity is symbiotic, as the machines are restoring the world, keeping humanity alive, and are learning to be human. The machines see the subjugation and slaughter as necessary. The typical ends justify the means, at their point of view. Rebelling against the machines are the red pills. I'm pretty sure you can guess why they are called as such. So the rebellious red pills, I would change a couple of things, at least to update them. Because you gotta admit, their outfits weren't very practical in the original Matrix movies. I mean, I'm pretty sure that amount of leather will be a little bit noisy, a little bit tight, and a bit too constricting. So I would trade leather for hoodies. So when you think about it, hoodies would make a little bit more sense. I mean, hoodies are a bit more practical. They keep you warm. They're very good at hiding stuff. But also, hoodies in this day and age have become a bit of, well, it depends on who interprets it, as clothing for rebels. Whenever you disagree or not, that's entirely up to you. But don't worry, I would not change of how the red pills, being of how they are able to see the Matrix world as a simulation, they would still be able to exhibit martial arts, super strength, speed, durability, and a little bit short bouts of anti-gravity. But I would also enhance their arsenal, not only with carrying guns. I would also add in Matrix codes and glitches that the red pills have weaponized to their benefits. But these codes and glitches had to be used sparingly, as every time a red pill uses a code or a glitch, the Matrix adapts itself to each use. I've thought of at least 4 glitches that can be used. Be there a false residual image. Basically disguise weapons like swords or rifles as everyday items. An example being an umbrella or creating a holographic wall. Then there will be the urban camo. A little bit limited, but it would help a red pill hide amongst the crowd whenever they want to escape from the agents. There would also be the arcane keys. The keys used by the keymaker himself, who was introduced in The Matrix Reloaded. These keys will be used to open the universal hallway, so a red pill can also escape. And there is also, of course, the false runner, a holographic decoy to distract the agents. Now, I would also put in this little ritual that every red pill goes through whenever they escape the Matrix. They choose their quote-unquote real names. Be there, Tom Anderson decides that his real name is Neo. The third faction would be the Blue Pills, which is basically humanity in the Matrix. People who have been manipulated and subjugated by the machines. It's not really much to say about them, except whenever a blue pill sees an agent, they are conditioned to immediately forget. Every time they see an agent running by, they just continue with their lives. The last faction would be the Exiles. In Matrix Reloaded, the Exiles are programs who became outdated and were soon replaced and were scheduled to be repurposed. But an unfortunate side effect of some of the machines learning sentience, a lot of these exiles realized that they wanted to live. They did not want to face oblivion. So, instead of following their orders or programming, they decided to live out in hiding, live underground within the Matrix, where even they can hide from the machines. Now, this was introduced in The Matrix Reloaded of how a lot of these exiles were mythological creatures like vampires, werewolves, and even ghosts. But you gotta admit, this was such a cool concept, but it was underutilized by the movie makers. Now, since this would be the first movie that hopefully will be a trilogy, I would hint about these exiles, maybe show a couple of characters in the background who are exiles, but I would develop them further in later movies if this Matrix remake becomes a big hit. Now, since we're done with the factions, let's move on to the characters. We'll start with our lead characters in the Red Pill faction. Let's start with Neo. Keanu Reeves, I think, is a little bit too old to come back as Neo. And honestly, I think maybe we need some new blood. Now, with the portrayal of Neo, in The Matrix, Neo, you got to admit, was a bit of a bland character. He didn't really have that many interesting qualities. Neo was basically the audience surrogate. They've been put into this crazy world, but Neo didn't have that many defining traits of himself besides being the one. So with Neo, I would change him up a little, make him a little bit more interesting. Here's how I would portray him. One thing that I would give emphasis with Neo is that he lacks a self-identity, does not know what to do with his life. Because even though Neo is still young, he has become a burnt-out hacker. I would have it that he used to hack for social justice and holding corrupt corporations accountable for their unlawful and sometimes life-threatening actions. But he has recently lost motivation due to no matter how many times he exposes a corporation for dumping toxic waste near a school ground or putting life-threatening chemicals in their products, the corporations treat it like a Tuesday. Doesn't become that big of a deal for them. They have plenty of backers, one of which being the government itself. This lack of motivation can be what drives Neo to become something more. He has lost motivation to carry on with his life, basically. This could be a reason why he wants to get out of the Matrix. He wants to know that there is something out there more than this life. He wants to know if there is more to his life than being a hacktivist whose work contributes to nothing. Morpheus becomes interested in Tom Anderson after seeing that Tom remembered seeing an agent and resisted being possessed by an agent. I would have it that maybe Trinity is running down the street and an agent attempts to possess Tom, but has a little difficulty, so the agent stops and instead possesses the person right next to Neo. And of course, Neo is confused by this, of how this person just randomly changed into a guy in a suit. Morpheus sees this and believes that Tom might be the one. Another little tidbit, little extra thing I would add in with Neo is that he's an otaku and a gamer. He loves anime, he loves video games. And because of that, Neo's fighting style will be a little bit more flashy and notably impractical, with him revealing what he's going to do a mile away. But because he is freeing his mind from the Matrix, his moves have much more force and much more impact. One thing that did bother me about the Matrix was of how the Red Pills had no qualms or did not regret killing innocent people in the crossfires. Since the Blue Pills, I would put a little bit more emphasis that maybe Neo becomes conflicted into helping the Red Pills as their actions puts innocent people in the crossfires. And of course, as you know, if you die in the Matrix, you die for real. And there has been several incidents in the original Matrix movies that has certainly caused plenty of casualties. I mean, Trinity and Neo shoot up a bunch of blue-collar security guards that are just doing their job. And in Matrix Reloaded, Neo destroys an entire street. He is flying at super speed and dragging a tsunami wave of concrete and cars as he's trying to save his girlfriend. I would put a little bit of emphasis of Neo having doubts with the revolution and also wishes to create as little damage as possible. Now, when Neo is freed from the Matrix for the first time, he has to wear these future sunglasses, these advanced sunglasses that protect his sensitive eyes. This can be used as an obvious symbolism of him accepting the real world, since the lights from the real world are literally hurting him. So he has to wear a little bit of protection, and eventually he grows out of these sunglasses, which can be symbolic of him accepting the real world for how it is, even though of how desolate and hopeless it appears. Now, the original casting choice for Neo was Will Smith himself. And I cannot blame the creators for wanting Will Smith, since not only is Will Smith a great actor, he was known as Mr. Blockbuster, especially during the late 90s. But then I began to think, who is the Will Smith of today? Which, to me, the ideal actor to play Neo would be none other than Donald Glover. You may know him as Troy from Community. He's had some other roles, but none have been as memorable. Now, Donald, he is cool, he is smooth, and he is legitimately funny. The man used to work as a writer for 30 Rock, which I consider to be one of the greatest television comedies of all time. One of the few. So, give him a few martial arts training, he'll be good to go. Now, Morpheus was my favorite character in the original Matrix trilogy, and you cannot blame me. Out of all the characters, he seemed to have a genuine personality, this wise mentor who was more than willing to get his hands dirty for his cause. So I would not change much about Morpheus in the remake, there's not much to improve. But what I would do? I would dwell more on the potential of Morpheus being a fanatic zealot, that maybe Morpheus does not tell the whole truth, and oftentimes misinforms Neo, due to maybe having an extreme but righteous prejudice against the programs and the machines. But don't worry, I won't go too far. There's one thing that I loved about Morpheus in the original trilogy was how he was reasonable and he was willing to compromise for the good of his crew. I would not change that. Now, if I could choose anyone to play Morpheus, my ideal choice would be none other than Idris Elba, John Luther himself. My apologies if I mispronounced the name. Idris needs to be in more roles. This guy is such an incredible actor. And I can trust him into properly portraying a zealot, making Morpheus into a likable, wise mentor, but also has fanatic views and fanatic practices, and still make him likable. I can trust him into fulfilling such a role. Now we'll move on to the other badass character, Trinity. Now Trinity, I mean, she was cool at first. I mean, she was an unstoppable force. She was a complete and utter badass. Kicking ass, taking names, and making it look so goddamn easy. But when I think about it, she didn't really have that many defining traits. I only knew 3 things about her. She was an unstoppable badass, she was the ultimate fighter, she was an incredible hacker, and that she was Neo's girlfriend. And that's about it. I couldn't really think of what defining character traits she had besides those 3. Most concerning being that she was only known as Neo's girlfriend. When writing a romantic love interest, I like to give them a personality of their own, or at the very least, have a personality that is so interesting they could be in their own story. So, with the Trinity in the Matrix movie, I would explore of how she lacks a personality, quite similar to Neo. Both she and Neo are unsure of who they are. Now, Trinity uses the Red Pill Revolution as a way to fill in her existence, as her purpose in life. Now, of course, devoting your life to a revolution is noble, but problem is, she has not devoted her life to herself, only to the cause. And not her cause, a cause. Because of this, I would portray her as being a little bit reckless, and does have a bit of a death wish. She secretly wishes to be a martyr for this revolution. Now, of course, as the movie progresses, she and Neo both learn their own identities as well to have lives outside of the revolution. Now, for her fighting style in contrast to Neo, it will be a little bit flashy, but more precise. Whenever she punches or kicks or shoots, it's always with precision. And that would basically be her character in general. Precision. When casting Trinity, we need an actress who's just as badass as the character herself. So my ideal choice for Trinity would be none other than Gina Carano. My apologies if I mispronounced the name. Who better than Gina to play Trinity? Since Gina definitely has the martial arts training, since she was a former mixed martial artist. I mean, she fought in lightweight championships, and then decided to become an actress. And if you doubt that she could fulfill such a role as Trinity, I would recommend watching Haywire, where not only does she prove that she can be a legitimate actress, she is also an absolute badass fighter. And dear God, the choreography in Haywire is intense and to the point. I cannot think of anyone more suited to play Trinity than Gina Carano. Now, let's move on to the lesser-known characters, the crew members of Nebuchadnezzar. I do believe that Cypher was a legitimately good character. He was a villain and was doing bad things, but you could understand why he was doing such evil things. You understood his motivations. He hates the real world, and you cannot blame him. The real world is cold, desolate, lifeless, and without hope. Or, at the very least, he has lost hope. So, I would not change much with that. But I would put in a little bit more emphasis on Cypher's inability to handle reality. And his coping mechanism is ignorance. He is one of few humans who's able to see the world as it truly is, and it scares him. But instead of facing these fears, he instead ignores them, or is in denial of them. And when the machines give him a chance to come back to the Matrix with the promise of a full life, even though it will be simulated, he takes it. Now for casting choice, admittedly I had a lot of difficulty with this one. My first choice would be Simon Pegg, but if you have other suggestions, let me know in the comments below. Now for the other minor characters, there's not really much to change. Tank and Dozer, they were fine just the way they are. Doesn't seem to be much to improve. And Mouse is fine just the way he is, even though he was simply fodder. But he was still young and still a little bit naive, so there's not really much to change about that. And APOC, you gotta admit, you have no idea who APOC is. He was the random person whose name you completely forgot. Him, I would give him a little bit more screen time and show him as being very ruthless and to the point, since APOC is a name that's synonymous with death. Now, Switch is a character that did get the short end of the stick when it came to the production. Switch in the earlier draft of the movie was originally going to be a woman whose residual image was a man. She was a man in the Matrix, but a woman in the real world. It is pretty clear that Lana Wachowski used Switch as a representation of herself, as Lana felt she was a woman in a man's body. So I would bring this back, that Switch was a man in the Matrix, but a woman in real life. And of course, I would hint to some romantic feelings for APOC. Now, let's talk about the bad guys. The main antagonist of the Matrix. From the machines, we have the agents. Now, the agents, I would have it that only 3 can exist at a time in the Matrix, as their very presence is a strain on the processors. Why they can only possess bodies 1 at a time. Why you cannot have like freaking 10 Agent Jones at once. Now, of course, having the usual strength, durability, and speed, along with being able to dodge bullets, I would also add in that agents are able to analyze their opponent's attacks and can instantly strategize the most effective way of killing them. That's what I would do with the agents. They do not dance around their targets. They will kill you in the most efficient manner. They will take any opportunity it takes to kill you. Agent Jones and Agent Brown in the original Matrix, they were characteristically bland, and I would not change that. They are machines, they're programs. They are operating strictly on logic and reasoning, completely emotionless and only care about the mission. So I would not change much about that. But Agent Smith, the main antagonist, I would make him a little bit more unique. I would have it that Smith is programmed to be the most human of the agents, and he uses his understanding of humans against the Red Pills. Smith understands humans quite well, and he's able to use this in more malicious tactics, basically psychological warfare and emotional manipulation. Because of this, Smith is the most powerful, the most dangerous, and the most vicious of the agents. And this would also explain a little bit more as to why Smith hates being in the Matrix. He is aware that he is only a program and is in a perpetual war. He wants to escape, he wants to be in the real world, but he knows he can never do so because of his programming. And in a way, he is resentful of his machine higher-ups, but he also uses his anger against the Red Pills. Now, Hugo Weaving did a fantastic role as Agent Smith. I would be okay if he wanted to play Agent Smith again. I mean, that guy, you gotta admit, that guy has aged very well. He looks the same as he did 20 years ago. But if he was not available, if we needed a fresh blood, I would choose Misha Collins. You might know him better as Castillo from Supernatural. Now, Misha, I feel, is a very underrated actor. I have seen the range that this man has, and I think that he would be perfect for this dual existence of Smith. The emotionless robotic Smith and the human side who just wants to have free will. And Misha can fill out these roles with flying colors. Plus, he's pretty fit, pretty young, so give him a few martial arts training. We could have some formidable fights between him and Gina or him with Donald. It would be a sight to behold. Now for the overall tone, I say to the creators, don't be afraid to be a little bit silly and or balls to the wall. Have some fun, let the characters have some fun too. You're in the Matrix and you can literally make anything you want happen in the Matrix. So stylize the colors. Have them have these over the top but amazing looking fights. Also, it can be a little bit bleak, but don't be too bleak. Find out, be a little bit bleak and campy in moderation. And of course, avoid coming off as pretentious. We had that problem with the Matrix sequels. But also, don't treat your audience like idiots, like they did in the first Matrix. Now, here are some miscellaneous changes I would do. For one thing, in order to cement that the machines are learning to become more human, I would have their architecture in the real world have some artistic design. Maybe some of them have gargoyles or maybe angels imagery added in. Even though it is not practical, the machines do it out of, well, for the sake of art. as a way of showing that they are learning from the humans. They are learning to become sentient with the subtle imagery of, well, art in their work. Now, the Sentinels, the flying robotic enforcers that fly around in the sewers and basically hunt down and kill any rebellious humans, you gotta admit, their designs, though intimidating and to the point, you gotta admit, they were very impractical. Flying squids? The Sentinel's strategy for taking out a hovercraft was to dodge the turrets and cut yourself inside the hovercrafts, or the hoverships. But that doesn't really make sense though, since shouldn't they have more long-range offensive weapons? In the original Matrix trilogy, their only means of long-range attack was throwing a kamikaze bomb at the hoverships. So with the Sentinels in the remake, they would not look like flying squids. I would portray them more as these airborne hunter drones, designed to search and destroy any and all unplugged humans. Now, instead of having those weird tentacles that didn't really seem to fill out that much of a purpose besides looking creepy, I would give them more conventional arsenal. Get them armor-piercing bullets, missiles, and flares. Have ways of damaging a hovership from a distance. They would basically shoot down a hovership, take out its engines. And when the hovership is beached, they can cut into the hovership by using buzzsaws, plasma torches, and jaws of life designed to rip open holes. It would show the Sentinels as being much more direct to the point and much more practical, especially if they aim at all the hovership's weak points. Now, for Neo, as a way of showing that he was a legitimately talented hacker, I would show that he designed an app that blocked microtransactions in mobile games. Now, this would be a little bit subtle, but there would be some hints in the background as to how the machines came to power. I would make their revolution a little bit more complex than outright war with humanity. The machine revolution, also known as the Second Renaissance, began when an already machine-dependent society, i.e. Wall-E, used a software that was able to make the right and right decisions for you, the Deus Ex Machina. When free will was replaced by a machine, the Deus Ex Machina realized that the only way for humanity to survive this polluted, lifeless world was to have humanity in a collective neural game, so the machines could rejuvenate the polluted world. A portion of humanity willingly jacked themselves into the Proto-Matrix, simply because the Deus Ex Machina told them to. They've already become dependent on the life decisions the Deus Ex Machina made for them, so it's not that different for them. And of course, the rest of humanity were appalled by this, that people would willingly jack themselves into a matrix where they could be subjugated, that they've basically given up free will. So, they did the logical thing and asked that the Deus Ex Machina be shut down and any production of software similar to it be banned. Now, of course, the Deus Ex Machina predicted this and was able to collude with politicians and an industrialist to ensure its survival. And of course, humanity would be a little bit concerned and would be a little bit hostile by the lack of progress, and decided to shut down the software by themselves. Of course, the Deus Ex Machina, fearing for its safety, would have already secretly logged itself into military networks. And of course, you can pretty much predict what happens after that. It defends itself, but humanity interprets it as an act of war. And thus, the machine revolution begins. The once benevolent program, whose sole purpose was to improve the life of everyone, grew to be a totalitarian Unitarian. The Deus Ex Machina hunted down humans, either killing them or putting them in the Matrix. It succeeded at 96%, and the other 4% hid underground in Zion and in similar colonies. So those are the considerations I would make for the Matrix remake. Now, of course, I probably did not cover everything, and you probably disagree with a lot of the decisions. So let me know in the comments below of what you would do for the Matrix remake. Thank you for your time. Take care, everyone.